You know that feeling when you're about to walk into a gig, set up a little handheld mixer, and then wonder if you're actually going to have enough control over every monitor, every AUX, every scene? I've been in that spot more times than I care to count, especially when the band's asking for a different mix on the fly and I'm still trying to remember where I saved that last cue. That's why I wanted to sit down and walk through the PreSonus StudioLive Series 3 64S before you decide whether it's the right thing to drop into your rig. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, this isn't a tiny, plug-and-play box you toss on a table and hope the magic happens. The 64S is a full-size digital console that aims to be the most flexible platform for installed sound, and that ambition shows up in a few places you'll actually notice when you're running a house of worship, a small theater, or a mid-size club. The console gives you 64 input channels and 64 output buses, all routed through a 128-channel USB interface, the biggest USB I've seen on a digital mixer in this price range. In practice, that means you can send every mic, instrument, and line source straight into a DAW for multitrack recording without a separate audio interface, and you can pull any mix back out to the stage or to an HDMI-connected screen for visual metering. The thing that makes the 64S feel like a real workhorse is the motorized, touch-sensitive faders. You press the Store button, name the scene, and the console remembers the exact fader positions for every channel, every AUX, every matrix. When you load that scene later, the faders glide up or down to match, so you get a visual cue that the mix is exactly where you left it. For a touring crew that does 3-hour sound checks each night, that kind of recall cuts down on the fatigue of manually resetting hundreds of knobs. I've watched a sound engineer at a regional theater pull a full house of worship mix in under a minute after a power outage, no guesswork, just the faders moving into place. Networking is another area where the 64S tries to future-proof itself. The built-in AVB, audio-video bridging, port lets you connect the console into a PreSonus NSB, network soundboard, ecosystem, so you can route audio over Ethernet to stage boxes, remote speaker amps, or even a laptop running a live streaming app. In a real-world scenario, imagine a church with multiple worship rooms, each with its own stage box. With AVB, you can send a single mix from the 64S to every room, adjust levels from the console, and have all the changes propagate instantly, no extra cabling, no extra snake. That said, you do need AVB-compatible gear to make the network truly useful, and if you're just mixing a single room with traditional analog snakes, that feature might sit idle. One of the most practical bits for me is the Onboard multitrack recorder. The console can record every input to an SD card, and it does something called virtual soundcheck. After you've recorded a full show, you can play back the multitrack on the console, route any channel to a monitor, and rehearse the mix as if the band were still on stage. For a band that can't afford to run a full soundcheck before every gig, that's a huge time saver. You get to lock in the balance once and then rely on the recorded tracks to fine-tune the mix later, which is a workflow you won't find on most analog desks. The Flex FX processor gives you 8 slots for effects, and PreSonus has loaded it with a handful of classic reverb emulations. If you're a small venue that wants a few high-quality reverbs without hauling out rack units, this can be a neat solution. The downside is that 8 slots can feel limiting if you're used to a rack of compressors, delays, and multiband EQs. You can still insert third-party plugins via the USB DAW link, but that adds latency and requires a laptop on stage, which some engineers prefer to avoid. Now, who should actually consider spending the money on a 64S? If you're running a fixed installation, say a church sanctuary, a school auditorium, or a club that hosts a variety of acts and you need to store multiple scenes for different performers, the recallable faders and 32 flex mixes, which can be used as auxes, subgroups, or matrix mixes, are a genuine productivity boost. The built-in multitrack recorder makes it a on-a-stop solution for letterbox recording, so you can release a live album without pulling an extra interface out of the trunk. And if you already use Studio One Pro, the included software license means you can drop the multitrack files straight into a session, edit, and bounce without any extra file wrangling. On the flip side, if you're a solo guitarist playing coffeehouse gigs, or a small wedding band that only needs a handful of inputs and a couple of monitors, the 64S is overkill. The price point sits well above entry-level analog mixers, and the learning curve can be